Hi everybody, I'm Bence Komloshi and I would like to invite you tonight for our weekly Architecture is a Human Right Facebook Live discussion. This week we will have Rania Qawasma from the USA, from Seattle, and in a very few seconds I would like to introduce you this whole series, what we are doing. It's about architecture, if it is a human right or not. We truly believe with two other organizations. I'm from the Architecture for Refugees and Architecture for Refugees, Schweiz organizations. And with two other organizations, the Emergency Architecture and Human Rights and worldarchitects, we believe that architecture is a human right. So we started a movement and we started a process to discuss this topic with all of you, with architects and non-architects. As a start, with the worldarchitects and with the Emergency Architecture and Human Rights, we started to have a manifesto. And on the page of the worldarchitects, we have this manifesto. So please go to our worldarchitects.com/architectureisahumanright. I will post it below, so you will find the link for sure. And where you can read more about the manifesto, what does it mean, what do we think about it, and also you can send us an email, or you can somehow contact us and start discussing this topic with us. Tonight, it's already the third guest, so third week. Tonight we will have Rania Qawasma as a guest. She lives in Seattle in the USA, and I would say, I met her I think 2 years ago online. And so I never met her offline, face to face. But as I see her work and as I know her, I would say he's a really good friend of mine. He's very close to the work we do here in Switzerland, for example, or in all around the world, let's say. And can you take some time to mirror? No, sorry, we cannot mirror, but we will have on YouTube, it will be mirrored, the whole story. It's a Facebook thing. So Rania is someone who is spending her time, a huge amount of her time on dealing with social issues, with architecture. So when I first met her, she was developing, or she was already having this booklet, which is called "This is Home." This is how it looks like. And she developed this book to have for newcomers, for refugees in welcoming cities such as Seattle or anywhere around the world, a kind of support. So if you need something at home, how can you reach it? If you want to go for a shopping, then what do you need? And she developed this toolkit, let's say, to help newcomers, to help refugees, refugee seekers, asylum seekers. So I think this is a very interesting booklet. Maybe she will talk more about it. And then we also started to talk about USA, about Europe, and so on and so on. And then we realized that we have a lot to do together. So we started the Architecture for USA. It has already a Facebook page. I think it's already online for more than a year now. And then Rania also started to develop new ideas, new projects with the name of Architecture for Refugees USA, but also as an independent activist, let's say. So she started this building bridges with the Seattle Design Festival. I think it was in 2017. They had an interesting event. And right now they are developing this Color My Home, which is, I would say it's an amazing project. So yeah, that's very in a nutshell about Rania. And this here on the Design in Public, you can find an interview with her. I think if you are down a little bit, you can just read this article and then you're gonna be super motivated again, because she talks about very, very simple things, but in a very motivating way. Please check our previous episodes on our YouTube channel. We already have the kickoff and the two guests, Cyril Hanape and Emilia Brandau. They are mirrored, so there you can easily read what is going on these Facebook Lives. We have a channel for this, Architecture is Human Right. And you can also find these videos on the World Architects page. You can also follow us, Architecture for Refugees, on Facebook, on Instagram. We have this YouTube channel, and we also have a newsletter, which I would really recommend, because nowadays none of these social media channels are really good, so I have to say. So I would really invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, so you will get a kind of weekly, or every second week you will get a newsletter. Not so much information, but just the very basic things. Please do share our projects and pages in your network, because this is how we can reach out more and more people with this Architecture as a Human Right project, or with any other projects that we have. If you have any questions during this interview today, the discussion, please do it in the comments, leave your message, so we will read it and we can try to answer it during the live. And see you on the next week. So on the next week, we will have on the 5th of December, so in 2 days, in 3 days, we will have Pedro Neto, a Portuguese anthropologist and architect, as a guest. So it will be, again, very, very interesting, I would say. That's about first intro. I'm adding Rania in a very few seconds. So yeah. Thanks, Rania, that you are here. I'm really happy. I already had this very short intro about your work, but I think you could, of course, tell more about what you do, how you do. And tonight, I wouldn't have a lot more questions. Only please try to start to introduce your work on this topic of, somehow connected to this topic of architecture is a human right.
Sure.
From okay. Wherever you start is great.
Okay. So thank you. Actually, I was logging in and I heard your introduction, and it's so sweet always, Ben. So it's always nice talking to you, and thank you for your excitement when you talk to me all the time. A brief introduction. I am a Palestinian American architect. I've been living here in the US in Seattle for close to 20 years. I've been doing work related to, most of my work actually in the architecture work is related to a human right, and it's a civic work mostly in both Palestine, in Jordan, and in the US. So that's a brief thing. Just for me, the idea of why I'm choosing that, it's I'm sure everybody is familiar with the whole long struggle of my people, the Palestinian people, the displacement. I'm myself as third-generation refugees. My grandparents, they were displaced from their homes. So the idea of that relationship between a place and people, it's crucial, it's personal. The whole thought that what architecture for me, it's identity. All the time I thought of architecture, I'm thinking of architecture, it's the way that I can express my identity, and I hope that I'm using that to help people do the same. So that's a brief thing of how I got into architecture. What does that mean to me? When I start working, yeah, go ahead.
No, just move on.
What I'm trying to say that the work here in the US, I always looked into affordable housing. I looked into architecture as a really crucial tool that we can use to provide people with healthy living, because that's the main thing. Basic human rights are shelter, food, and health. And shelter, it means architecture. We always put that aside. We think the role of architects, it's only to design sculptures or buildings or forms or any of these entities as a way of expressing themselves as architects. It's for a long time, architecture, it was connected with ego expression, people, they think of themselves as artists too. For me, I looked at it in another way. It is a tool that can be used in activism. I consider myself an activist and an architect at the same time, and I use architecture to help as much as I can to make the place somehow better, although it's really hard lately. So So
you didn't mention community, but now also on our manifesto you can find that actually to belong to have the possibility to belong to a community, it's also a human right.
Architecture, definitely.
So I think it's all your work, like if you mention the booklet, if you mention the building bridges, or this current project is Color My Home, I think it's always really trying to bring the community together, or to strengthen the network or the relation between.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like I'm coming to that. So part of my work too, it's I'm not just an individual architect. Like I looked as architecture, it is a community work. It's a civic work that connects the designer with the community. You cannot build a home just by yourself as an architect or as a construction worker. You cannot build neighborhoods. You cannot build cities. You cannot build communities if the communities are not involved. That was my goal from the beginning. So every project I try to get involved in, I'm using, like I'm working with the community. I don't want to even say help, because it's an exchange service. I go there with this in my mind, that I do have certain tools, certain skills that I can use, and the community itself will work with me, and we can build that project together. So when we talk about the book, first thing, part of my...
Just before you
yes.
sorry, but I mean, like this thing of involving community.
Yeah.
Also in the previous interviews, we were talking about these things that are like, yeah, like in theory they are super easy, or like involving community, let's do it then. But in reality it's super difficult, I would say, I guess. So how can you give like 2 examples or something, or even like just one,
of how I do that?
How to do this involvement, yeah, how to really manage to...
But for me personally, it's first, if I belong to that community, you have to have something in common. I'm not gonna go as a stranger, as a foreigner architect, as an architect from, for example, just Seattle, that I have no connection to any community, and let's choose a small city or town in the Middle East or in Africa, and go and tell them, you know what, I know better than you. I'm going to go and design for you, and wait, because I'm the architect who's coming from Seattle, and let me show you how it's done. So that's actually the first thing that it fails when you're talking about building bridges with communities. For me, I look into projects that I know that either I'm going to be part of that community, that I'm there. I am a Middle Eastern Palestinian refugee architect. So when I go and talk to a refugee community, to immigrant communities, they know that I know the culture. They know that the questions that I'm gonna ask, the work that I'm gonna be working with them, it's culturally sensitive. I'm not gonna be imposing things or telling them what's right and wrong for them. So that's one part. That if I'm not connected to that community, I'll find somebody from the community to partner with. So that's another thing. It doesn't have to be, I'm not saying that if you are from another city or town that you cannot go and work on projects in different territories. No, that's definitely not. It's the way that you approach community. So, and just the thinking of undermining that the community itself, they are rich in culture, and they do have people within these neighborhoods, within these cities, that they can work with you. So there are architects in a lot of towns. Maybe the resources, it's not provided, but for us, if we feel that we want to help, it's a matter of connecting with the right people, coming in with a little bit of humility that I'm not the one who is just a professional, knows better than you. No, I'm here to learn. I'm here to partner with you. I'm here to listen, and you are doing the work. It's not only me. So I try to use these two.
Cool. Nice. Yeah.
I hope that that's answered the question.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, really. No, this is like exactly. Perfect.
Because we see that, and it's not, I've seen and worked with a lot of designers and architects, and I know the intention is right. Like, we do have this, that you want to go and help people. You look at watch the news, you read, you know that there are disasters all over the world, especially in our field right now. Displacement, it's taking over. It's one of the growing disasters right now in human history. It's displacement. People, they don't have homes to live in. So a lot of architects and designers, they have that intention to go and help. But the way that you approach community, it's really important, because you can right away looked at that you are, again, I don't want to use like really political terms, but like some people, they're going to be looked at that they are using colonialism as a tool. Like, it's history repeated itself. It's a colonizer settling, let's say, a strategy or ideology that, yes, I am the Western, I am the one who's studied in Western universities. I know architecture better than you. We have tools, we have resources, and let me show you how it's done. And a lot of communities, they don't want that. They already know how to build homes. They already know how to build communities. They already have a way of living that it's been proven in years and years that it's working. So if we want to help, we can go and partner with the communities and work with them. And that's what I've been trying to do as an activist and architect, and trying to just not only work with the communities, but also talking with fellow designers and architects that how important this matter is. So.
Nice. I think it's also connecting this whole discussion about this activism, community development or something, or like this way of communication with the locals. It also goes to maybe to this first project I learned from you, this booklet.
Mm-hmm. So that's,
like, is it architecture? I'm asking myself. I have an answer which is like, yes, it is architecture, but like, because it has a lot to do with neighborhoods and with bringing people together in a way. So, but how do you see this? Why do you think it's also like your architectural knowledge was useful to to develop this book, or it's more about your activist part?
It's both, actually. So I choose not to disconnect both of them. I choose to think that like my role as an architect and as an activist, they collide all the time. So when I look at people, especially, I work with or try to be involved in issues that has to do with displacement, with refugee issues, refugee crisis. I try to volunteer with organizations that they do help refugees, and still, like, the architect in me trying to see, like, how can I help more, like what can I provide, like what tool I can give people that can ease their life. So and looking and talking with communities, and being myself an immigrant who came to the US and tried to figure my way around, and going through a culture shock of like, how can I learn this and that. It's a common thing. It's something that we see, that different cultures have different way of living, different styles, and that always become a reason or a tool for people, for the locals, to look down for anyone who's immigrant if they don't know how to use these tools. It's something that you look at somebody who's a stranger and they don't know how to turn on the faucet, or they have a different way of cooking, they have a different way of living, the way that you drive from one place to another. It is different. That's normal. That's how we build our homes. That's how we live our lives. Just looking down to people, it gives the refugees more of a burden of that I cannot ask questions. So that process of trying to find their new home, the process of trying to just settle in, dealing with trauma and finding their way again, it gets harder and harder for them. So, and that's what I noticed. And I took it from a perspective of like their home, their neighborhood, what's going on there. I start talking with families, and I didn't want to do something, again, just me anticipating or like looking or figure out and deciding, okay, you know what, that's what you need. No, it was 100% exchange. This book, it's a work of families and me. Like I know I have the skills, I know the tools, I know the questions that I want to ask, but the answers, they were from them. And there, a lot of families, they used to come to me and tell me, Rania, add this. I had this problem with kitchen disposal. Oh, Rania, I add this. I had hard time finding my way in my neighborhood. And it came like just thinking of what does architecture mean. It's not only a form, it's a relationship between people and space. And when I looked at the whole thing, we as architects, and you know that when we want to design a building or a neighborhood, we look at program and then we start designing, we build, and then we need to have a manual. And that's the book. The book, it's a manual for a neighborhood, for people to just try to figure out how to use that neighborhood, how to figure out their way around. And it was a growing tool that people, they kept giving me their input. And every day, actually, I take notes from people and I add it on. And I want to right now do the second version of a lot of notes from a new refugees that they came in. So that's the whole idea of that book. And what I noticed about it too, that it made me, for me, it made me like, it feels really that somehow this simple infographic book did like made a difference, that I've seen elderly men and people carry it around, walking with it, trying to open a page and see like what's going on, how can I find out what does that mean, how can I things that we always take for granted for us, for a newcomer, whether you're a refugee, you're an immigrant, or you're anybody who's visiting the place, it could be a little bit overwhelming. So that was the whole idea of this book. And like to answer your question again, yes, it is architecture. Architecture is not only a building. Architecture, it's designing a form, using the form, maintaining that. So if we're going to talk with technical terms, architecture, it is like, it needs a manual at the end to use that building that you design. So
there is a question, let's try to answer that.
Sure.
How do you tackle with the restrictions that are everywhere in difficult architectural settings and sites? Any tactics that work in practice to intervene?
I am trying to understand, like, what kind of restrictions? Like, are we talking about restrictions as a woman architect? Like, what does it mean to be?
I think restrictions can be anything like regulations, or like, you know, that you are not allowed to do this, or like there is no proper way of doing in a way legally. Yeah, so in a legal way. And
it's
I can give like a very short answer, maybe while you are thinking. Like, I believe that we have to start doing it, and while we are doing it, we will always find a kind of way of doing.
See, but like, if I wanna look at it this way, restrictions, there are restrictions and obstacles in everything you do. That's there. And if I wanna, maybe this will go to another discussion. But I did not talk about this. I'll talk really briefly. Just the idea of me as a woman architect, a woman of color architect here in the US, that was a struggle. There were restrictions all the time for me to find a job, for me to design a project, for me to put my foot in. That's another thing. If we're gonna be tackling a human right, architecture as a human right for architects themselves, there is no diversity in architecture, and we know that in the practice itself. The practice, it's been, if I want to talk about the United States and a lot of parts in Europe, it's been for a long time and until now dominated by white male. Women in architecture, they're still like struggling to find their way. And if you look at the recent statistics saying that women right now, they're 25% of all architects in the US, and in Europe, some places it's 19, some places 20. Women of color, we are 0.001% of architects in the US. So like one of my friends told me, like, you're unicorns, guys. we don't see you a lot.
So
because
you say right now not architecture is a human right. Even architects don't have the right to
no,
even
no,
everybody.
that's
Yeah,
that's the other
and I
thing.
think it's
So
true. It totally shows exactly. This totally shows this thing with this. So if not everybody has the access to architecture, to the education, let's say, or to practicing architecture, then it also shows that not everybody, not all the communities can have their own like architects who
yeah,
understand what is going on, and it can be a man or a woman in this case, or it can be a different color or whatever, but like you cannot be represented in this architectural society just because you are not a white male.
exactly. And that's actually, that brings me to the second project that I started with my friend. So my friend Yasi Ismail, she's a Iranian architect. Both of us, we've been like talking, and again, we have a lot of things in common, a lot of stories that we can share and talk about, like how hard it is to be a woman of color architect here. And we kept thinking, like we're thinking of what we want to do, and we came up with this project, Color My Home. And Color My Home, it has it works with like two ideas. Both of them, they benefit people of color here in the US, but also benefit any underserved community, any community that suffered from displacement. They don't have the basic services provided for them, like architectural service infrastructures. And we kept looking like, how can we help? What can we do? And the first thing came to our mind that let's work with children. Let's make, like, help children know that they do have that opportunity to be architects and designers and urban planners, and they can have part. They can design their own homes. They can design their own cities. They have an input. Even if they don't want to be designers, they know what's going on. They can go and be involved. So Color My Home, it starts like right now. Next week we're gonna have our first workshop. We're so excited. We have 25 kids that they got excited and they wanna participate. Right now, the first one, it was targeted especially displaced refugee kids that they've been here, like they came recently to the US, and we're gonna walk them through that journey of their home in the past, the journey to come to the US, and their recent, like their present, what's the place that they live in right now, what's the neighborhood, and the future. What do they see? How can they imagine their home? How can they see themselves growing in a place that they can call it home? And it's all in a fun, I hope that's what we're planning on, fun, interactive way. We're gonna give them tools, things that we use in architecture school, things that it's fun, place, model making, drawing. So it's gonna take them outside of the box of thinking that, okay, I'm just stuck in this place. No, or I can be an architect, I can design. It doesn't have to be somebody else who come and tell me how can I live and what's the shape of my home. I can do that. I have the freedom to do that, and hopefully just keep doing this workshop. Right now, we're talking to a couple of organizations to have a couple of it in Seattle, and then moving to other cities in the US. Hopefully, we're talking with communities outside the US to go and have the workshop there, and just giving that, planting that seed that people that they live in communities that they are underserved, people that they've been displaced, people that they've been discriminated against. We have a lot of communities here in the US that they suffered from gentrification. They were kicked out of their homes. We have a lot of homeless here in Seattle. So it's not only like it's just one sector. There are a lot of communities that have been suffering from that lack of equity in architecture. We don't have equality in architecture. So we're trying to work with them, help them see that, yeah, let's do that together. You can be architects, you can design your homes. So I'm excited. Like I'm talking right now on behalf of me and Yassi, and I'm sure that she's watching. But both of us were really excited to do that. So.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really, I think in one hand it's just simply like nice and motivating, and in the other hand it's really the thing about architecture. So I think architecture can really make changes, and architects have a lot of tools and a lot of power to make changes in about our built environment, about identity, because our spaces have an influx on our identity. In many families, kids are bringing this kind of integration tool. So newcomer families still don't speak maybe the language, but their kids start in the schools. They have more possibilities, since for adults it's not always accessible to have education, the language schools. But for students or for kids, it's very often a basic thing that they just allowed to join to enter the school system. So, and this kind of process can really bring the integration process, let's say, or can bring these families closer to the society, but also the society closer to these families. So I think this whole process, this inclusion, it has two sides: the newcomers, but also the locals, the welcoming society. And I think we have to think with both sides mind. In the meanwhile, I'm gonna show, because at the end I didn't show, but there is like I brought 3 books just for today. One is The Arrival City. I think it's interesting. Maybe you can check it in the next days. There is another book, it's Making Heimat. It's about Germany and about arrival countries. This one is more about architecture. And then we have this third book, which is also a little bit more like practical, because the first 2, it's a little bit more theoretical. But this third is also bringing architectural projects, mostly from Germany, but I think not only from Germany. So you can see like plans you can find, and you can find, I think sometimes better, sometimes less good projects, but you can find projects and architectural thoughts and spaces. So I think it's also good to have these 3 books around. And let's see if you can add Rania for a few more seconds, but I think we can now follow her work on the Architecture for Refugees USA Facebook page, or even like hopefully they will have posts about this workshop they are going to organize now in Seattle. And if there is anyone around who would be interested to check this Color My Home in a way, or join their movement, then I think they are open to have these kind of discussions. And also here in Switzerland, there is now a discussion or several discussions about architecture and the new generation. Charles Gans from the worldarchitects is also really open for these kind of things, and he always says like the kids is the new generation, so we have to involve them and we have to teach them. So if we teach them, then we have the future. This is really, I think this is really nice, this project again. And if you have, we still have a few more minutes, seconds. So if you have anything like a kind of last topic, that would be great to finish with.
Let's see. Actually, I want to say first that if anybody want to be involved in our project, Color My Home, if any community, they feel that they're in need for us to come in and work with them, we're happy to do that. Like you can check our Facebook page. You can email us, text us. We have our Facebook, Instagram, Color My Home. You can email me or Yassi, Ismail, both of us. I can like add both of our names. Just contact us and we're happy to come, whether you are a community here in the US, you want to come and help us here, Europe, and we are going in the summer, hopefully, to the Middle East, like we're planning on going to a couple of places there. So that's one thing. The other, yeah.
I think it's also about this one. You always talk about the lack of activists in the field of architecture. So how to empower or how to encourage architects that this thing that we are talking about. It's important. So I think if someone is watching this from Seattle, then you must contact Rania and you must start doing things together, because I think together we can do much better things. This is my experience here in Zurich. So just do it.
And the other thing too, it's I always tell people that I know that the easiest thing to find the excuse that we're busy. We're always busy. All of us were busy. And I always hear that from people, that I don't have enough time. If I share with them how I start my day, I'll finish my day. And the time that I have, I don't have time. I have my 24 hours, they're already, all of them used, like the one that it's not used, the one that I sleep in, and still like I think when I'm sleeping. And I have the weekend, I have a family, I have a full-time job, and you know, like anybody else, architecture job, it's not an easy one. You don't go and work 8 hours. You're always involved. Like it's well known that it's a job that takes a lot of your time. But at the end, you try to find it. Like if you want to go and help, you want to participate, you want to see that, you want to make a difference beside just watching and being upset. And that's, trust me, the worst thing to sit down and watch, because you're going to be depressed and you're going to find all the reasons to make you give up. And when you look at the projects that I'm working on, those are really simple ones. Like I try also to find simple projects, because I don't want to complicate people's life. I don't want to go and just force in something that just I believe that this is the way it's going to be. No, I try to make things fun and easy and simple, and let's learn from it while just we're engaging and socializing. And it doesn't take much. So yes, if you feel that you're busy and you don't have time, we all don't have time, and it's okay. Like you can just jump in. Half an hour, it does help. An hour, it does help. So yeah, come and join us.
There is one more question, but before that I would like to add to these thoughts, this slide. I developed it with students from the Tirana Architecture School. It's a Polish university. I will read it. It's about from the culture of waiting to the culture of care. And with the students, we developed around 8 thoughts, and one is them listening and responding. I think you mentioned this, like dealing with communities. You have to listen first. No more excuses, so just do it right now. And if you want to say not because, then you are already on the wrong track. Many small make a great. So we have to do a lot of small projects or whatever. So it's gonna make a big change at the end. Be proactive. So I think not waiting for other people, just do it, because then it's like we have to start new things, and so on and so on. So maybe you can also check these things, like the listeners. And then there is this last question for today, which is about if you have connections to Europe. Do you have connections to Europe? I think from you,
I have
can
you.
answer it. Yeah, I think if you ask Rania, she has asked.
Yeah.
And
I do have you.
So yeah, and we have a lot of connection in Europe. So I think it's,
of course, I always value our partnership, and I know the same thing, that we look for really simple, small things to do to make to feel hopeful. Because if not, we're gonna always keep talking about how bad the situation is and how worse it's getting. But that's what I enjoy, guys, when I talk to you, when we discuss little things. They are the small things that make a difference, because you don't notice them, and you just start and finish, and it doesn't have to be always complicated. And one on top of another one, you'll make a difference. So.
Rania, thanks a lot.
Sure,
it was
thank you.
A super nice discussion, I would say. Like every time.
Thank you again.
And see you hopefully soon, and we're gonna follow your work and your project.
Sure.
On Instagram, on Facebook, and we keep in touch.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye.